This episode of Cape Ann Today is brought to you by the Building Center, setting the standard for quality and service since 1903.
I am talking to Planning Board member Shawn Henry, and we are trying once again to clarify concerns around the 9, but are there really 6 zoning amendments put forth to Gloucester City Council by the Planning Board. Are there 9 or 6, Shawn?
There are officially 9 amendments, but it really comes down to 6 changes in the zoning ordinance themselves. The other 3 are just footnotes,
Okay.
correcting the footnotes to address the changes that are made by the other 6 amendments.
People have expressed concern that these changes are being inspired by the state's housing agenda. Where did this idea originate? Where did these amendments come from?
Well, as I've been trying to explain to folks, these ideas all come directly out of the housing production plan, which was initiated locally in, I believe we started late 2014, completed it in late 2016, and it was adopted by the City Council and the Mayor in 2017. And following the production or the acceptance of the housing production plan, we went to work on some of the guidance that it provided us in terms of making the changes to our zoning to increase the housing stock that was, again, determined by the housing production plan that we needed.
Okay, so the housing production plan, their mission was to increase housing stock. And what are you trying to achieve in these 6 amendments?
Right. Well, one of the goals of the housing production plan was to for us to take a look at our zoning ordinance and see which ordinances were stifling growth, were limiting the growth that we said we needed. And again, housing production plan back in 2016, when we wrapped it up, we were projecting a need for approximately 650 new units of housing of all types, single family, multifamily, particularly multifamily, and smaller units for, we have an aging population of seniors that are overhoused in their current stock. And we have a dearth of smaller units, be they in 3-family units or 2-family units that a senior citizen could share with a family member, that sort of thing. So basically, this part that we're focused on here is taking a look at the various zoning ordinances that, again, are limiting the easy production of units. And so we're specifically looking at 2-family conversions and 3-family conversions for the most part in this. We don't really touch on multifamily production. It's really limited to 2 and 3-family. With the 2-family units, we currently citywide, excluding RC40, 2-family is allowed by right with new construction or conversion of an existing building with internal modification. The only way getting to 2-family is limited through a special permit process is for conversion of existing unit with an addition, with an exterior modification. So that's one of the amendments that we're looking to treat that use exactly the same as the other 2 ways of getting to 2-family, removing that special permit consideration.
Okay, so can I just jump in here? Well, you would be eliminating the need for a special permit if you are changing the exterior of the building when you are converting to a 2-family. Is that right?
Correct. And again, you have to meet all other zoning requirements. You have to have a full-size lot. You have to meet your setbacks. If you diverge at all from any of the zoning requirements, the dimensional requirements for the lot or placement of the building, you would still have to go to the ZBA for relief from that. But it removes the requirement for a special permit just for the conversion itself, if you are meeting all other requirements.
Okay, and though you're talking about the existing zoning restrictions. So nothing changes about the existing zoning restrictions. You still have to conform to that. It just makes it, you eliminate the need for a variance if you're changing the exterior.
A special permit.
A special permit, right? Okay. All right. So let's say right now you need a special permit to do this, right? To do this work.
Mhm.
Are people applying for special permits and not getting them? Is it so? Why can't we just proceed with the need for a special permit? Is it hard to get them? What's going on there?
It is a lengthy process to go through and can be expensive because it's not such an easy process that most homeowners are going to do it themselves. you're required to hire an attorney, or not required, but you're most likely you're going to hire an attorney to do it.
To get a special permit?
Yeah, to go through the zoning board process to get the
Oh.
special permit.
Okay.
You would have additional documentation you have to provide to go through the process. And there's no guarantee, even though people like to say that the ZBA does routinely approve these things, there's no guarantee that you would in fact get it at the end if you're failing any of the other standards. So again, what we're doing here is not eliminating that ZBA review process. If you're on a substandard lot, that sort of thing, you would still be going through the ZBA process for that. What this removes is special permit process for those homeowners with completely compliant lots that meet all the zoning requirements, just as someone who would be building on raw land, building a new two-family on raw land, which is allowed by right. There's no special permit required for that, or the conversion of the existing house just with internal modifications. There's no requirement for that.
Okay, all right. And again, there is nothing stopping someone in the zoning process right now from building a two-family or three-family home on a compliant lot, right? So
Nothing stopping them from doing a two-family home. The three-family currently is by special permit. That's the other zoning change. Within these amendments, we've recommended that the special permit be removed in the R5 district, which is where the majority of three-family units we have.
which is R5? Where is R5?
R5 is predominantly downtown.
Okay, all right.
Ward 2, portion of Ward 3. Basically, it's Washington Street over the downtown area is predominantly R5 through that.
Let's talk about the height, raising the height restrictions. What is the purpose of doing that?
Well, I think it's important to note that our zoning was instituted in 1969, I think, adopted in 1969. There was absolutely nothing in our zoning restricting height until 1982, when the council instituted a 60-foot height restriction on commercial buildings. They didn't address residential height until later in the 80s. I think 1986 or 1987 was when for a while it was 35, and then it was reduced to 30. And as I've said, 80% of our housing stock, or of our lots, are non-compliant. It's also important to know that about 80% of our existing buildings throughout Gloucester were constructed before any of these ordinances that we're proposing to amend were instituted. So there's a large supply of houses throughout Gloucester that are over and above our current 30-foot limit right now.
Where are most of them?
It varies. So a lot are downtown. You look to, this just came up the other day at a P&D meeting. Home came in to modify to a four family, and City Council is actually giving them a retroactive permit to be 48 foot high because the building was built back in the early 1900s, 48 feet. Again, when there was no restriction. And so a lot of the homes in that neighborhood, Beacon Street, Centennial, are over 35 feet now. And again, they're spread throughout. There's no way. A city tried several years ago, they said to try to do an aerial measurement using LiDAR technology. And unfortunately, it wasn't advanced enough at the time to really get a good measurement. But again, if you refer back to presentation that our planning director, Greg Catamatore, gave to the Planning and Development Committee last month, they have several samples in their photographs of existing buildings. I think one shot is from Washington Street. Another shot is from in North Gloucester someplace. But anyway, showing a line of houses varying in height from 30 feet to just below 35 feet. And it's very hard to distinguish from ground level which is which, because basically to the normal person, naked eye, they look very similar. So basically, that's a long way of getting to the story that we went with 35 because we have a lot of 35-foot structures in the city already. The 30-foot limit actually makes it a little bit more difficult to create 2-family and 3-family homes on that smaller footprint that is desired. So the extra 5 feet allows for a bit more, again, vertical integration rather than spreading out a large mass. So you could do legitimately do a 3-floor home within 35 feet much more easily than you can do the same project in 30 feet, right? So basically that was one consideration. The other consideration is the height relief is a very common request from the ZBA now, both for those design elements of trying to, again, fit more space into a more compact, vertically integrated package, and also in the neighborhoods where flooding is a problem. People want to boost their house so that to alleviate the threat of flooding.
Well, it seems to me that the height restriction is being discussed detached from this argument of making it easier to create these conversions. And people are concerned that this is suddenly going to be that changing that height restriction is going to be an opportunity for someone building a single family home to just make it higher and get a better ocean view. I feel like that's being tossed around a lot. Is that true? Does this suddenly make it easier for someone with a single family home to make it higher?
The 35-foot limit would apply to single family as well. So
Awesome.
if somebody was constructing a new single family home, they could exercise that right and go to that height, the 35 feet. There's nothing restricting a single family home from doing it.
So after all these ward meetings were held, the 5 ward meetings, there seemed to be a general concern about the fact that my neighborhood will change because of these amendments. How do you respond to that?
Again, I think, as I've said, 80% of the lots throughout the city are non-compliant. So that means that 80% of lots and existing buildings would not be able to exercise these by right uses in the first place. They would still be, if they're non-compliant, would still be forced to go through the ZBA process to do any of these things that are included with this. And again, those non-compliant lots are pretty equally spread throughout the city, including those neighborhoods, so that it's unlikely that the neighborhood itself, you'd see such visible change in those neighborhoods because so many of the lots within that are non-compliant.
The Cape Ann Climate Coalition is concerned that these amendments support larger buildings that will require more building materials, higher energy needs, and increased stress on soil, marshes, biodiversity. So how do you respond to that issue?
I think actually, again, because these amendments are dealing predominantly with conversion of existing units to either 2-family or 3-family, we're actually doing the opposite of what they're suggesting. That we're not advocating that, or we're not encouraging the creation of new large buildings. We're actually by encouraging people to add an addition to an existing home to create that 2-family or to create a 3-family. We're actually, I think, more incentivizing compact units to be developed, not huge units, but rather smaller units on already developed lots. So there's not the additional impact on the environment that you would have with new construction someplace, right? If I'm building a new
repurposing.
Yeah, right. If I'm building a new single family home someplace, I am, adding a driveway. I'm taking away impervious soils. So much more impact on the environment than if I'm just simply adding an addition onto an existing home. So I think their goal of reducing the environmental impact, I think, is answered with these amendments by saying, rather than go out and build a new single family home someplace, think about converting an existing home and using that resource that already exists, as opposed to going out and taking up more resources on land that's not yet been developed.
That makes sense. So they are also concerned that these amendments incentivize waterfront development. And, getting back to that height restriction, that's concerning. What do you think?
I think there's general demand for waterfront properties, regardless of what the height limit is. I think we see that now with building that takes place, again, all along our waterfront, whether it's Wingersea Beach, opposite Good Harbor Beach. I think the waterfront just happens to be where people want to live, and where a number of people want to live, and those pressures on development there are exist with or without the additional 5-foot height allowance. I think there's a valid point to be made that the city could in fact consider some restrictions on development in the future in those FEMA flood zones, velocity zones, that sort of thing. But I think it's a different issue than what we're dealing with here, because again, we're trying to address a citywide issue, citywide need for additional housing, and not pick on any particular neighborhood here or there. So again, trying to do it uniformly throughout. The waterfront development issue could be addressed much more effectively by addressing the new FEMA flood information, velocity zones, that sort of thing. But I think that's a different and very specific discussion to those restrictions.
Right. Well, just one more question for you, Shawn. So this is around the state's recent order to create multifamily zoning overlay in proximity to MBTA stations. People are getting that issue mixed up with these amendments. Do you want to clarify?
Yeah, well, I will say that the amendments that are before the council right now are completely locally generated. They've been at play, again, since we first started discussing them back in 2013, 2014, and actively drafting them beginning in 2017 with no state interference at all. It was all a room full of Gloucester residents sitting around a conference room table over on Pond Road that developed these. The MBTA Communities Act was signed into law about a year ago by Governor Baker. The guidelines are still in draft form. I think they're working those out now. I think they're supposed to be the final version sometime later this year when the state adopts them. Hasn't yet come before either the planning board or the city council. I believe there's a informational meeting presentation scheduled with a co-meeting between the planning board and city council for March 9th, I believe. That's it. Again,
but this is totally separate from the 6 or 9 amendments that we're discussing right now.
Right. Yes, it's particularly because, again, as we've discussed, the 9 amendments deal specifically with 2 and 3 family development in Gloucester, whereas the MBTA Communities Act specifically addresses multifamily development. So, which the only amendment that we've included in this round that addresses the deals at all with multifamily is for the Main Street Central Business and CCD, which is the area surrounding City Hall, allowing 45-foot mixed use residential development in those districts. Okay. Again, to account for, to try to encourage redevelopment of our, currently empty buildings on Main Street, like CVS, the CVS building, Santander.
So, Shawn, is there any way that these amendments can be amended again? And for instance, if there's a lot of concern about single family homes being too high, can you, eliminate the height restriction or raising the height restriction on single family homes and only make it apply to these conversions? Can things like that happen?
Yes, in terms of the amendments, they're all individual and will be taken. That's why they were made. Each one was a separate motion at the planning board level, and each one will be a separate motion before the city council, both at P&D and at the council level. And each of those amendments can be further amended by city councilors to do some of the things you're talking about, either modifying, they could take out a particular district if they want to. They could modify the height allowance to be more restrictive in certain ways. I don't know off the top of my head what the language would be for, again, specifically removing single family homes from that, but they could consult with legal department and come up with the language to, again, restrict it to fit how they see it best being implemented for the city. So all of these are subject to modification at the city council level.
By the city council. Okay,
Yes.
great. Right. Well, I know this is on so many people's minds in the city. If people want to learn more, how can they do that?
Well, two things. I would say go to the city website and download the housing production plan because, again, a lot of questions have come up about what's motivating this. And if they go to the housing production plan, it's a long document, but basically from about page 58 through 68 in that document, it deals specifically with what it was asking us to do with these amendments. And so you recognize in those sections what we're doing here with these amendments. The second place I go to look is the city website. They've put together a page. Basically, it's one-stop shopping for information about these amendments, and includes the presentations that Greg Katamadori has done to date in front of Planning and Development Subcommittee. It includes the presentation that I used at the ward meetings to present those amendments. And it also includes recordings of those 5 ward meetings. So if people missed them originally, they're on the website and they can access them there to watch the presentation and see the questions that came from their fellow residents at all those meetings. So it's a good link. I'll provide it to you. And I think that's the place where people can get direct answers to a lot of their questions. But again, I'd encourage people to take a look at the housing production plan, because it does particularly address what our motivation was in pursuing these amendments, and it explains Gloucester's needs for this housing.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I think this helped me a lot to understand the issues better, and I hope it helped other people too.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Interested in a sponsorship? Email sponsor@1623studios.org to learn more.